You're seeing more and more national analysts say it. Could Auburn overachieve in 2024?
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining us today, it is the Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football, my favorite national college football podcast. We were talking before we clicked record. You were going back and forth on 7-5 or 8-4 when talking about Auburn's 2024 record regarding their schedule, regarding production. And you're saying 8-4 now, Spencer.
Yeah, I do. I like where Auburn is at. I don't think this team is going to hit the ceiling of what Hugh Freeze coached Auburn football can one day look like. But I think they have taken steps this offseason to move in a positive direction. And look, I think getting to a bowl game last year was a pretty solid accomplishment given the messy situation Hugh Freeze was inheriting. I think he is a good football coach. I think guys like Philip Bleedy and Cam Coleman can make a real impact for Auburn this year in a positive way, amongst others. But I have a rule on my show, Zach, on Locked On College Football, that I strictly adhere to. And that is, if you are a team returning your head coach, quarterback, and offensive coordinator, I have a hard time picking against you. Now, Auburn's only got 2 of the 3, but you can't say that isn't better than most. Go up and down the SEC, Zach, and tell me the number of teams that return both a head coach and quarterback. And what you'll find in the commentary that I've put out on Locked On College Football is that I like those teams. Georgia, head coach, quarterback, and offensive coordinator. Ole Miss, for instance, Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin. And do I think Peyton Thorne's a world beater at quarterback? I do not. But a second year with Hugh Freeze, who's more of an offensive coach, and I think bringing in a new OC is the right decision there after what happened last year. And the way that you talk about the offensive line and how they should be able to perform with a ground game in there, I think that this is an 8-win Auburn team. When you look at the schedule, it'll come down to a couple of key matchups, particularly the stretch in which they play 3 straight games on the road. I don't know what they did to tick off Greg Sankey and company to deserve that, but that's the stretch that I think will really define what Auburn's record will be. But the more I think about it and the more I look at their schedule, the more I say, I think that's an 8-win team.
I want to go back to your comment about the offensive coordinator situation, because Hugh Freeze, when you think of Hugh Freeze, you think of 2 things. You think of recruiting and you think of offense. And he wasn't really involved in the offense a ton last year. And I don't know if that was all because he wanted to focus solely on recruiting, or if he hired a former head coach to run the offense and he's like, you should be capable enough to do this. And he just wasn't, when we talk about Philip Montgomery. But from a national perspective, you covering this from, just the college football national lens, when you hear, okay, Hugh Freeze is going to be more involved in the offense, you got to think, oh, this team's probably going to be a little bit better then.
Yeah, I like that. I like that element of it. And, in college, it's really hard for head coaches to call plays. It's something that, I've talked to the head football coach at Southern Utah University, who I do play-by-play for. And when I first interviewed him and he got hired.
I drove by there last week, by the way.
Yes, a beautiful place. It is an absolutely beautiful part of the country. But I asked him when he showed up, because he was coming from a Division II school. And I said, I asked him, are you going to call plays? He said, no. I said, why? He said, well, a head coach today has to deal with so much. He might want to call plays. He's capable of calling plays, but it involves so many facets. There are just a bunch of elements to the job now. It's not a reasonable expectation. So being able to find guys who you believe are the right play callers, the right coordinators for your team, is arguably as important as your ability to know the X's and O's for a head coach in college football today. I mean, far be it for me to bring up someone who Auburn fans might not love personally, but Nick Saban, one of his greatest traits, I know, I'm sorry, I'm never getting invited back.
Dude.
I know, but one of his greatest traits was replacing high-level coordinators and going from one great OC to another great OC and going from this guy to that guy, and there not being a drop-off. And that's something that Hugh Freeze is going to be tested here, because the first offense coordinator hire was not great. So if he vibes with Peyton Thorne and he's able to just be closer to what he had in 2021 from a season standpoint, then I think this Auburn team can hit that 8-win threshold. Because when you look at the schedule, I think it is, certainly punitive in the middle, but I think the start and the end are very, very manageable.
Yeah, I think the first month is going to be crucial, not counting August 31st. So, the month of September is going to be crucial. I think Auburn has a very real chance to start 5-0. I've talked about it before, time and time again. Auburn hosting Oklahoma on September 28th is the most important game on the schedule. But you teed it up. I mean, Auburn's October, they do not play at home. They go to Georgia, off week, to Missouri, and to Kentucky. If Auburn can win one game in October, I really think they've got a solid shot of going 8-4.
I think if they win if they win 2 games in October, they're winning 9 football games. But if they win 1 game in October, they could still win 9 football games, because they come home at the end of the year against Texas A&M before they go on the road to Alabama. You've got the Louisiana Monroe game tossed in there. Vanderbilt is not going to be great. By the way, an interesting note you may or may not know about this Auburn schedule, Zach. Did you know that on Auburn's schedule are the 2 teams, according to our friends at FanDuel, with the lowest win totals in all of college football?
So Vandy's one. Who's the other?
Who do you think the other one is? I'm curious.
Is it ULM?
It is not ULM.
Is it New Mexico?
It is New Mexico, who has a 1.5 win total for first-year incoming head coach Bronco Mendenhall, who's got a solid track record, but Vegas doesn't like what the Lobos could potentially do this year. But
the last time a team from New Mexico came into Auburn, it was not fun.
I think that game's going to be a little bit more enjoyable and tenable for the Tigers fans at Jordan-Hare Stadium, which I hope continues running efficiently and effectively through the month of October, because no one's going to be. Are you guys going to have concerts there? Like, I don't even know what happens when a stadium just sits there. I feel like the stadium is going to get sad, but then of course it will be exciting later in the year. So I think that those games are easy wins. You can look at, several matchups and say, well, what about the Cal game? Which we'll get to later. What about the Oklahoma game?
You can't wait to talk about Cal.
I cannot wait to talk about.
That's the only way I got you to agree to do this.
100%.
Like, hey, I'm pre-recording a bunch of shows. I'm going on vacation. You're like, I'll come on if you can let me talk about Cal.
That was my one. That was indeed my one condition, but. I think it is incredibly manageable. And I think you have to win to get to 8 wins. One of those Missouri-Kentucky games, I think that is definitely a requirement, because saying that you're going to beat both, even at home.
How sold are you on Kentucky? 'Cause I don't know if I'm really there, man.
No, there's two
average SEC teams or bad SEC teams. The fact that it's in Lexington, I do think it's a factor, because Auburn struggled on the road, with the exception of going to Arkansas and Vandy. They're better than both of those teams from a year ago. But I'm just not quite sold that now that Auburn actually has more talent on the roster, now that Hugh Freeze has been here for 2 off seasons, I don't think this is. When the schedule came out, I was like, that's a tough one. Now I'm not so sure I'm buying that anymore.
I think it all comes down to Brock Vandagriff, because if he is what we think he can be, then Kentucky is maybe closer to, like, they feel like one of those teams that's got a really.
He couldn't be that dude at Georgia. How's he going to be that dude in Kentucky?
Well, not being able to be that dude at Georgia is not exactly a slight. Like, if you're not good enough to beat out Carson Beck for the starting job, I don't think that automatically means that you're a bum at quarterback. I think we don't know what he is. And Kentucky, for the last several years under Mark Stoops, has felt like a very high floor program, but a very low ceiling program. They remind me of Air Force in the Mountain West. Like, they're not going to bottom out and be just absolutely terrible. But are they going to be a conference title contender? Also, no. Is kind of what the tradition has been over the last several years. So I think that Kentucky game can certainly slip you up.
Who's more important in this game, Brock Vandagriff or Peyton Thorne?
I would lean towards Vandegrift because I think I trust Auburn's team around him a little bit more than Kentucky's. But I think it's pretty close. Like I would expect the betting line on that game to be under 4 points. I would be shocked if it's anything over 5.
I think I'm with you on that. All right, Auburn needs to start 5-0 if they're going to overachieve, obviously. How do they do that? Can they do that? We discuss in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Spencer, let me ask you a very quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Very quick question. Can you imagine buying a part for your car, truck, or SUV anywhere other than eBay Motors?
No, I cannot.
I'd rather not have a working car than do that.
Bold statement.
That's just where I'm at.
That's a 9.5 on the Josh Pate boldness scale.
Okay, got it. You're the only national show that I listen to, so that's fine. ebaymotors.com. They've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, so you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. They've got eBay guaranteed fit, so your part's guaranteed to fit every time or you get your money back. So check it all out, ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. USA. All right, Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On Cal, hanging out with us. There are so many Auburn fans that think you host Locked On Cal, which is
glorious.
We don't have a Locked On
that's
Cal.
the greatest honor any comment section could ever bestow upon me, other than Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
So I've got a text here. I scrolled all the way up from when Sam Jackson committed to Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Former Cal quarterback, now an Auburn wide receiver. And you said, I quote, Sam Jackson is the greatest college football player of all time.
Well, I mean, positional versatility is just undeniably the most important element. I need someone who can both catch a pass coming through the legs from a center and throw it, and a pass coming out of the right arm of a quarterback. If you can do that, I don't know that we've ever seen a college football player like that in the history of the sport, quite frankly. So, given that, I don't know who else is pushing. I mean, Bo Jackson, maybe. Like he could get consideration, but Reggie Bush was a one position guy. Lame sauce. Absolute lame sauce.
Yeah, Sam Jackson could play multiple positions.
Exactly.
There we go. All joking aside, like, we kind of painted the game between Auburn and Cal early last season as tricky because it was kicking it off as close to midnight as a football game will allow you to. It was very late, especially for Auburn. Probably normal time for Cal.
Pac-12 after dark, baby.
Pac-12 after dark. It's a real thing.
R.I.P.
Yeah, it used to be a real thing. And then Auburn had to travel across the country, and it sounds like, there's a lot of factors that went into it. And I mean, Auburn almost slipped up and lost that game. They tried to give it to Cal several times. Literally, they handed them the football multiple times. This one has a different feel to it. I mean, this is a game that Auburn should take care of business. I think this should be a pretty simple win for the Tigers. Am I too low on Cal in saying that?
I wouldn't say simple. I think this is an Auburn win. I think this is absolutely an Auburn win because they are at home. Last year, I thought it would be Cal because Cal was at home, and all the factors that you mentioned, the long trip, the late kickoff, it's not something Auburn was familiar with. And, college football scheduling is completely broken and messed up. I talk about that all the time on my show. I wish it would be done on a year-to-year basis, or at least a 2-year basis when you schedule a home and home, but it's done like 7-8 years in the future. I don't know how this one got scheduled. It's one of the most random non-conference home and homes I have seen in all of college football. Like Auburn and I don't know what the tie is. There's probably an administrator or an alum or a couple got married and I don't know. There's got to be something in the works there. I think it was. This has always been about Sam Jackson to me. Obviously, it was scheduled with the foresight that Jackson was going to one day transfer to Auburn. I can't believe I didn't arrive at that conclusion a moment ago.
And you host a national college football
show. I know. I'm
slacking.
Absolutely slacking over here. I promise I will do better. So I think this matchup is not going to be an easy one for Auburn. I think Cal has had a nice offseason. They have done exceptionally well in the transfer portal. They brought in a couple of defensive backs this year after they lost a couple guys from last year's team. Fernando Mendoza is giving them quarterback clarity, whereas last year going into the season, they had more quarterback questions. Sure. I thought Sam Jackson would be that answer, but then they were back and forth with him and Ben Finley. And then Mendoza got a chance to play because of injuries and poor play, and he established himself as the starter. The tricky part for Cal is the offensive coordinator role. They lost their OC, Jake Spavital, to Baylor, which I think is one of the more under-the-radar coordinator moves because it's happening at Baylor, where the expectations are just, are not expectations, but the discussion around Baylor is, will Dave Aranda keep his job? Is it going to be good? And I think Spavital did wonders last year. They promoted David Blah, I believe is the guy's name, the tight ends coach from a season ago, to the OC position rather than making another outside hire. I'm not entirely sure how to feel about that. Like it could be okay, but Jay Knott is a stud. They lost Jeremiah Hunter at wide receiver, but they've got Fernando Mendoza and Jay Knott back from a year ago. That is a formidable backfield, and Cal was a bowl team last year, and I think they can be a bowl team again. I just don't think they've got everything they need to go into Auburn and win at Jordan-Hare Stadium.
How long do you think bulletin board material lasts before it expires? Ott, before the game last year, said Auburn was just a name, and then he found out Auburn was not just a name. Do you think that's still applicable to use within the locker room and within the fan base leading into the matchup this year?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, Washington notably bucked the trend of Oregon beating them every year back in 2016 when Oregon had just its second losing season this century, and they came into Autzen Stadium and blasted Oregon 70-16, and Jake Browning pointed at an Oregon player, taunting him as he went into the end zone to extend a big lead. And let me tell you that image did not leave Oregon circles and the locker room until they beat Washington again 2 years later at Autzen Stadium. And I mean, frankly, it's a photo that will still pop up on Twitter every now and then. And, I'm sure that those images have now been replaced tragically from what happened last year. But I think that stuff can absolutely last. I think it can play a factor. And guys, remember, because it's college football, Zach. There is no sport that has greater urgency than the greatest sport on planet Earth.
That's right.
There's just nothing like it. You remember the games. And even the NFL, which is, of course, the biggest television product in the country, maybe in the world, from a sports standpoint, you can't match the level of remembrance because you just play a team once, typically, not twice. Like last year, I'm a big Seahawks fan, and the 49ers are our big rival, and it's never felt the same to me as, an Oregon-Washington or an Oregon State matchup, for instance, but I couldn't tell you specific moments, plays, sequences. I just remember the Seahawks lost to the 49ers last year. I could give you a play-by-play rundown of what happened in Seattle or in Las Vegas at the Pac-12 title game when I was watching in person. Like, that's just what college football does. That sort of mystic lore sticks around, so I'm here for it.
I love that our teams have played each other both in a national championship and in a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And both went my way.
I don't like that.
Michael Dyer, thankfully, was not down.
He was absolutely...
We're still not over it yet.
He's absolutely down. Nope.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I will never get over it until the day I die.
Got it.
Or until Oregon wins the national championship. Once that happens, then I'll forget.
I want to talk about the 4 toss-up games that I've kind of labeled Auburn's 4 toss-up games and get your thoughts on all 4 of those in just a moment. Right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, whether it's for the MLB, whether it's for college football, whether it's for the theater, or anything. Spencer, can you imagine going to an event and not buying your ticket through the Game Time app?
I mean, when you can get everything from sports to comedy on there, I don't know what else you are looking for. And I don't know about you, Zach. I'm a gigantic stand-up comedy fan. I've been to 2 stand-up comedy shows, actually 3 in the last 2 months.
Really?
Yes, I have.
Who'd you go see?
I saw Jerry Seinfeld in Las Vegas. A different time in Las Vegas. I saw a couple of comics who I didn't know at Brad Garrett's Comedy Club at the MGM Grand. And then I went all the way to Los Angeles just for a one-night Netflix is a Joke Fest featuring Jerry Seinfeld, Sebastian Maniscalco, I might have pronounced that wrong, Jim Gaffigan, and Nate Bargatze. And
wow,
it was glorious.
That's
yes,
fantastic. He got all those
excellent.
tickets through the Game Time app as well. He got to see where he was sitting within the app. He also got to see what the total cost of tickets was. They don't just show it all to you at the end when you're at checkout. It's all included in the ticket price. So right now, you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, Locked On College, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. 4 toss-up games, Spencer, on Auburn's schedule, in my opinion. And if you think I need to add more, let me know. Like, I'm leaving out Cal. I'm leaving out Arkansas. And I'm leaving out Vanderbilt. If you think any of those need to be in there, please call me out. But right now, I think your 4 toss-up games are Oklahoma at home, at Missouri, at Kentucky, hosting Texas A&M. To me, that's going to make or break Auburn's schedule as far as if they overachieve or if they don't.
Yeah, I think those being classified as toss-up games, I think that is absolutely fair and the right designation. I would have Cal a notch above Arkansas and Vandy. I think Cal is a better team.
Of course you would.
Yes, I think Cal is a better team than both Arkansas and Vanderbilt this year, and I think it'd be the most likely game of those 3 to lose. I'm not going to pick Auburn to lose any of them. I just don't think Cal will be a cakewalk. I bet you that line is probably Auburn. Let's see, last year was 5.5 at Cal. Both have had solid off seasons. I'd say that line is probably going to be around 7 or 8. I think it'll probably be in that sort of range. Wouldn't be shocked if that's a win, but don't cover, depending on what that number actually is. But the other games, I agree, are in the toss-up category. Now, Oklahoma is interesting because they do not have the same offensive coordinator or quarterback as last year. They do have the same head coach in Brent Venables.
Or offensive line.
Or offensive line. Now, they have made moves. They added a transfer from SMU along the offensive line, who was an all-conference guy last year, should help solidify that particular unit. But that's a legitimate question for them. It's probably the biggest question for Oklahoma because they have had a good portal offseason, most recently getting Dominic Williams from TCU along the defensive line. That is an impact player who steps in and starts right away, all-conference caliber dude, 2-year starter for the Horned Frogs the last couple of years. And then Jackson Arnold is like Miller Moss at USC. We know what he did in a bowl game, and it looked great, and it showcased what the potential is. We have not seen him start over the course of an entire year. So he played against Arizona in the Alamo Bowl, and he was great. Oklahoma lost because Arizona was a better team, but Oklahoma has got a lot of games on their schedule like everybody else, not just one game. So how do you respond after a loss? How do you deal? He threw a couple of interceptions in that game, but showcase all the talent that he has, and he's a really highly touted recruit. And I like Jackson Arnold a lot. But how do you go to the next week after losing the week prior? How do you respond in a big game? How do you play against this defense? How do you play against an SEC team on the road? We don't know what the answers to those questions are, and we'll just have to wait to see them play out.
Well, and Oklahoma's interesting. I think all the pressure's on Oklahoma. I've made that case a lot because their first SEC game is in Norman. They host Tennessee. Well, I think Tennessee will be a top 15 team at that point of the season.
Yeah, Tennessee's pretty good.
Yeah, so either Oklahoma wins and they say, okay, yes, some emotional high, then you've got to go on the road to Jordan-Hare Stadium, which is a tough place for opposing teams to win, regardless of how good or bad Auburn is. Like it's something crazy about that building. And then the following week after Auburn, their next opponent is Texas. And so Auburn's kind of sandwiched in there between these two playoff, nationally seen playoff, contenders. And then there's Auburn sandwiched in the middle, not getting a whole lot of attention from the Oklahoma side. I think that matters. And I don't think I like Auburn's chances. in this one, Spencer?
Well, you certainly have the look-ahead factor with Texas because that is the circle game. No matter what the record or expectations are for Oklahoma in a given year, Texas is the game, like the Iron Bowl for Auburn, that you're always circling. Like, hey, no matter what happens, just
there's a
win
bye
that.
week between Auburn and Texas. I didn't realize that. I still think it matters.
I agree. I still think that matters a great deal. But having come off a game in which you're playing against Tennessee, and that's your first introduction to the SEC, like what if Tennessee comes out and punches him in the mouth? A couple of good young quarterbacks in that game. Jackson Arnold for Oklahoma, Nico Iamaleava for Tennessee. Both guys just played in the bowl game last year, showed the potential, but we don't know what they're going to be. I think that'll be a really, really good quarterback battle to watch. And that game is in Norman, right?
For Tennessee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a really good game. But if Tennessee plays to their potential, they win that game. What if they punch Oklahoma in the mouth a little bit? What if they beat them by 10, 14 points on their home field, right? What if they're feeling...
Then the pressure is, oh my goodness, if we start 0-2, we made this big deal about leaving the Big 12 and coming to the SEC. What if we go 0-2? Oh my goodness gracious, what happens?
Right.
I think regardless, the pressure is on Oklahoma.
Auburn being at home has to shift a decent amount of it to the Tigers, though, because Oklahoma should be good. They should be a good football team. Will they be great? Probably not. Yeah. I wouldn't think you're going to go from a 10-3 season playing in the Big 12 to going into the SEC with the schedule they've got and replicating a 10-2 regular season. I don't see that. But if you're an 8-win SEC team, well, yeah, that's a good year. That's a good team, and I think Oklahoma is a good team. I think there's pressure going both ways because of the home field factor, but I like what you said about the week prior. And conversely, if Oklahoma at home rides the home crowd to a victory over Tennessee, suddenly your expectations about the Sooners change completely, where you look at them and go, wait, Tennessee has got the second highest win total of any team in college football at 9.5. They're expected to be an SEC and playoff contender. Is Oklahoma at that level? Is that the way they're going to play? If Arnold goes for 350, 4 touchdowns, and they win the game, 31-27 in kind of a dogfight, you go, wow, that was a really impressive win. Tennessee looked really good, but Oklahoma was just a little bit better. Then you might feel differently going into that one, and it could have a sense for Auburn of, hey, this might be a little bit more dangerous than we thought.
So for the sake of time, when you look at the 4 toss-up games, Oklahoma, at Missouri, at Kentucky, and hosting Texas A&M, right now, shooting from the hip, what's Auburn's record in those 4 games?
2-2. I think they win 1 at home and 1 on the road. And you can talk me into whichever matchup you'd like. They'll beat Oklahoma but lose to Texas. They'll beat Kentucky, lose to Missouri, and however many other different permutations there would be. I think the caliber of the opponents dictate that that's going to be a 2-2 stretch because between Oklahoma and Texas A&M, you have a couple of good teams. And this is not... do we call it your dad's Texas A&M team or your younger brother's Texas A&M team? Because Jimbo Fisher isn't there. Mike Elko is there. I think that is a coaching upgrade, and they are going to have, though they've had plenty of players leave, they brought a lot of guys in. They've got Connor Wegman at quarterback, and I think they're going to be, again, a solid team, not an SEC title contender. But I don't think that about Auburn, and I don't think that about Oklahoma necessarily, and that's why those games, as we've talked about, are in the toss-up category. And then you have Missouri, which, can we just shout out Eli Drinkowitz real quick? Because having the Missouri Tigers not only beat Ohio State soundly in a bowl game last year for an 11-win campaign, the preseason win total of 9.5, I did not think when they made that jump to the SEC and struggled for so long, did not think we would see that again. I thought the Chase Daniel A's days were over, but he has brought them back to life. So I think that Missouri game is tough. And then we talked about Kentucky. I think beating Kentucky is going to be a lot more feasible than beating Missouri, who I expect to be a very good team. I don't know if they're going to be an 11-win team again, but I think that they should be quite good. They have, of course, are replacing their defensive staff because Blake Baker went down to take the defensive coordinator job at LSU. So there's a little bit of coaching turnover there. And at a place like Missouri, look, they obviously feel good about the hire. But once upon a time, Hugh Freeze probably felt good about Philip Montgomery as the offensive coordinator and said something positive about him. Then the results came on the field, and that didn't go the way as planned. And that's not unique to a unique story in college football. So
No,
I think the more likely outcome, or the most likely outcome, is 2-2. I do think 3-1 is more likely than 1-3.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously if they go 3-1, I mean, this is a 9-win football team.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if 10 is in the cards. I think I think 9 is probably the ceiling here.
Sure. I think most Auburn fans would take that in a heartbeat. I know for sure I would. Spencer, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
I host Locked On College Football and Locked On Ducks Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And Locked On Cal is coming soon. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It is not. But, Cal comes up from time to time on the old Locked On College Football podcast when applicable.
Yeah. Comment down below. Does Spencer actually host Locked On Cal? Genuinely curious. Like the video. Please subscribe. We will see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.